Sutta Nipāta, Book 4, Aṭṭhaka Vagga. Sutta Nipāta 4.1, Kāma Sutta, on sensual desire. When sensual desires reach their culmination, certainly the person, having pursued and now reached his sensual goal, suddenly finds himself fully satisfied. But inevitably, when that gratification slips through his fingers, despite his best efforts, as the climax of what was born out of fervency fades away, he feels defeated and betrayed, as if shot by an arrow. Whoever avoids the trappings of sensuality, much like avoiding to step on the head of a venomous snake with one's foot, similarly, while being mindful, he transcends the craving for this world. The one who lusts after possessing numerous things, whether fertile lands to own and cultivate, gold and silver, cattle and horses, servants and maids, women and many offspring, soon finds himself overwhelmed and depleted by them, weakened and pressed down by them, and is met with pain and distress, as if being in a sinking boat. Therefore, mindfully avoid sensual desires, giving up your reliance on them, by fixing the holes on the bottom of your boat as you fearlessly cross over the flood and reach the farther shore. Sutta Nipāta 4.2, Guhaṭṭhaka Sutta, buried in a cave. The man sunk deep in delusion stays buried in a cave, immersed fully in defilements. Thus he is far from ever looking for seclusion, for the world and the never-ending sensual pleasures it offers always keep him tightly bound. The strong desire in the heart to re-become, while shackled by enjoyable experiences of the senses, does not allow them to ever taste escape, as they are too busy recollecting experiences and memories of the past, while looking for more sense pleasures to be tasted in the future. Deluded by sensual pleasures, always hungry for more sensual enjoyments, they remain heedless, maintaining a wrong lifestyle that is continuously immoral and without virtue. Consequently, they fall into misery as they cry and wail, "Oh, what shall become of me once I am no more?" For this reason, one must make the most of this life, training and preparing oneself now in this dispensation, by avoiding actions that one knows to be wrong. For as the wise proclaim, this life is indeed very short and will soon come to an end. I see people around me trembling in the world, caught in the net of craving to become this or that in their future birth. Meanwhile, they remain in misery, caught in the jaws of death, unable to cut free from the longing to be. Look at how they struggle in horror, worried about possessions they leave behind, throbbing like fish in a dried-up stream. In seeing this yourself, do not be miserly and live unselfishly, and abandon the drive in you to seize anything anymore. Enough of desiring in the seesaw of the two extremes. Come to finally recognize contact for what it is, free from lust. Never do anything that the wise may consider blameworthy, and do not get attached to what is seen or heard. By fully understanding perception for what it is, and by giving it up, just like the sage, cross over the flood, unstained by whatever you touch, never grabbing onto anything. Thus, with the poisoned arrow pulled out, do not wish for this or any other world. Sutta Nipāta 4.3 Duṭṭhaṭṭhaka Sutta 8 on evil intent. While some speak with evil intent, others speak with a mind that is set on truth. Thus, no sage will ever be produced by disputes, for the wise never go looking for debates, which is why there are no more positions left for them to either defend or oppose. But while holding on to wrong views, how could anyone transcend their own desires and emotional drives when their entire worldview and way of thinking is flawed? Truly, one is responsible for how one thinks. After all, whatever one speaks is none other than what one repeatedly thinks about. Without ever being asked, many keep talking boastfully about their own virtuous conduct and adherence to the training rules. But such behavior is one that the wise categorically declare to be the very opposite of nobility, and in fact, evil in its nature. However, you will never see a contentedly calm bhikkhu, quenched in his heart, to boastfully list his own virtues or tell others about his adherence to the training rules. It is such behavior that the wise fully declare to be noble, where there is nothing left in the world for him to show off about. When following a teaching or a system that is made up and false, meanwhile promoting it despite its many flaws, simply because for now there is some benefit one gains from it, well, one will taste the outcome of all that for oneself, as their peace of mind will always remain unstable and their heart fully disturbed. It is not easy to overcome or to let go of wrong views, when all one does is substituting this teaching for that, while grabbing onto them, having reached some conclusion about the world. So, people continue to take up this idea while giving up others in turn, without properly investigating what they believe in, nor testing or seeing its proof for themselves in the first place. But for the pure-hearted, there is no more formulations of different views, or ready-made conclusions about the world, or ideas about this or any other life. Such beings who have given up the illusion of comparing and contrasting, no more latching to any concepts, they go beyond, with no one able to know as to which way they went. Meanwhile, the majority keep seizing and grabbing, caught up in controversies, disputing over this or that teaching. But how could the pure-hearted, remaining aloof and uninvolved with all that madness, ever be pulled into such foolish affairs? For they are done with validating or negating the existence of a substantial self, having utterly freed themselves from the entire gamut of views. Sutta Nipāta 4.4 Suddhaṭṭhaka Sutta 8 on the pure-hearted. I see the highest purity, which makes the heart truly healthy. When people possess the purity of view and see how it transcends all others, they develop the genuine understanding that recognizes through knowledge and sees with no more resistance the spotless purity of the heart. But a person's heart is not purified by merely seeing, nor is suffering abandoned by simply picking up new knowledge. Nor does one become free of attachments through someone else, for the truth of what lies hidden underneath will come out into the open in times of strife. the great Brahmin declared how purity of the heart is not attained through mere seeing, or listening to another, or the following of rituals and ceremonial practices, including the keeping of one's vows and training rules to impress others. None of these will bring purity to the heart, for the truly pure stand taintless amid both good and evil, as they take up only to give up. But others, though they give up one thing, soon latch on to another, with emotionality and hearts full of longing for this and later for that. As a result, they will never cross over the floods. So, they remain no different than the monkey jumping from tree to tree, letting go of one branch only to grab another. Although having undertaken the training rules, he still goes from teacher to teacher, while grabbing onto new views that he collects as he develops more and more conceit. But the one who has seen with the right wisdom no longer needs teachers to go to, nor views to collect or hoard, for he practices while dwelling with Dhamma in his heart. Not being associated with anyone, he is no longer angry at anyone. Being secluded from all worldly Dhammas, he has nothing left for him to see, hear, or experience in the world. And while living so openly and with nothing to hide, who could look upon such a bhikkhu with blaming eyes? Not making a big deal about this view versus that, they do not latch on to theirs, claiming it to be the best, for they have removed the venom of grabbing from their hearts, and now live liberated from all burdens, having fully relinquished everything, with nothing left to yearn for in any world. With nothing left, the Brahmin has now gone beyond all boundaries that confined him. Although he knows and sees, he is left with nothing to grasp or hold on to, as he is no more a victim of passions, nor latching on to the experience of being passionless. Thus, he is left with nothing to grab and nothing to pick up anew. Sutta Nipāta 4.5 Paramaṭṭhaka Sutta 8 about the greatest. Those holding on to their views as the greatest are the first to claim the views of others to be the lowest, while asserting their own as nothing less than the very best. Because of this, they always find themselves caught in the mire of disputes and never far from conflicts. Seeing some benefit he might have gained while developing himself, whether through a new way of understanding or a view, or something he might have heard, or from observing some training rule, or some kind of an experience, and by seizing at that, he goes on looking down at all others for not sharing his experience or view. But to have the view of seeing others as less than himself, simply because they are different from what he has seen, known, heard, experienced, or practiced as a training rule, is in itself being shackled and bound up by those very things he considers as the greatest. Thus, the bhikkhu should never rely or depend on what he considers familiar. So, the bhikkhu must never look upon the world through the lens of his own notions of what constitutes the practice of training rules and rituals, thinking of them as a gauge to what he thinks is proper. In that way, he would neither place himself on an equal footing as others, nor compare and contrast himself with others as being inferior or superior to them. Thus, he puts down what he himself had picked up, but this time never to grab hold of them again. And by no longer taking sides with this group or that, nor relying on ideas, nor being attached to views, such a wise one stays free from becoming entangled in conflicts. Not hoping for either of the two extremes of living forever or no longer existing, whether in this life or any future life, there are no more positions or views left for him to grab. So, carefully consider what the Dhamma teaches, no longer having any views for you to roost over. Not having any more thoughts or even the slightest perception about things he has seen, heard, or experienced, the Brahmin is left without any views for him to grasp, nothing for him to call my own. Therefore, how could anyone pin him down by finding him blameworthy or at fault? Although firmly established in the Dhamma, the Brahmin does not treat it as some doctrine or dogma to be held on to. Similarly, he no longer needs to be led by any training rules, whether to fit in or to impress others with. In this way, he lives without any anxiety or worry, for he is now truly untouchable, having gone far beyond to the farther shore, never to return back again. Sutta Nipāta 4.6 Jarā Sutta, Getting Old and Decaying. Very short indeed is this life, where before reaching 100 years' span, he is already dead. And even if one were to surpass it, still he most certainly will get old and die because of his decaying body. People grieve over things they cherish, not willing to let go. But there is no way to hold on to things forever. Witnessing the inevitability of separation again and again, how could you still be surrounded by loved ones living the household life? Whatever you think belongs to you, all that, in its entirety, will be given up and abandoned when you are dying. Understanding this fully, someone who calls himself a wise student of mind would no longer build emotional ties with anything or anyone. That which is experienced in a dream, but at waking up, is nowhere to be seen. In exactly the same way, no loved ones are to be seen again the moment you are dead and gone. Even though you had a relationship with those you loved, calling out their name and hearing their voice, but the moment they are gone, all that remains is the name you knew them by, which you can now only speak out loud and nothing else. Those unwilling to let go of things accumulated in the past, also in their stinginess for acquiring things, do not want to part ways even with their wailing and sorrows. Meanwhile, the sages in their quest for true peace and calm fully give up the seizing and grabbing of possessions, whether of people or of things. As for the bhikkhu who lives withdrawn from the crowd, secluded as he dwells and practices in his humble abode, it truly is more beneficial for him to reside alone, staying away from associating with those living the household life, and avoid being seen at their homes. Not calling any place his permanent home, the wise one does not get settled anywhere, fully detached from any likes or dislikes, remaining free from the burden of developing relationships, whether those with friends or with enemies. Thus, much like the raindrops sliding off from a leaf, so too with grief or the desire to grab and possess that come with associating with others, these tendencies can never find their home in his heart. Just as a water droplet cannot latch on to the lotus as it slides off, leaving its petals and leaves unsoiled and untouched, likewise, the sage remains unsoiled and untouched by whatever that is seen, heard, or experienced. Thus, the wise one remains pure, because he does not continue thinking or imagining about what was seen, heard, or experienced, nor does he seek for something outside of himself to come and purify him, for he is finished with being passionate about things, including dispassion. Sutta Nipāta 4.7 Tissametteyya Sutta. Discourse to Tissametteyya. The Brahmin Tissametteyya said, "Sir, I desire a training in your dispensation. Teach me about the destructive factors that result from engaging in sexual intercourse. Once having heard your teaching, I will go into seclusion and train accordingly with diligence." And the Blessed One replied, "Those who engage in sexual intercourse become neglectful and forget all about the teaching, going in the wrong direction, returning to a life that is not noble. When someone who abstained from sexual intercourse in the past goes back to engaging in sex, he resembles an uncontrolled vehicle that has gone off its rails, one who is now called dwindled and inferior, a true Putujjana. The fame and good reputation he once had suddenly diminish. Therefore, by listening to this teaching, train yourself to fully give up all sexual contact. Squashed down with constant imaginings and thoughts of what-ifs, he turns into a dejected wretch, a helpless fool, as he faces the embarrassing statements of blame others keep saying about him. And when criticized by others, he tries to retaliate by charging forth with his verbal daggers. In doing so, he resorts to covering up, trying to desperately conceal the truth of his actions, while only drowning himself further in misery. Even though he was once admired as wise and held in such high esteem when living in seclusion and diligently training himself, but now, engaging in sexual acts, he has become dull-witted and utterly confused, no more than a fool. Knowing and considering this terrifying danger, while looking at his former and current life, the sage should, therefore, be resolute in remaining alone, and never allow himself to engage in any sexual acts ever again. Training himself thus, and in seclusion, is the ideal method of practicing this noble path. But remembering to not become conceited in his training is what will draw him nearer to Nibbana. Meanwhile, all the people around him, drowning greedily in sensual lusts, look upon such a sage with much envy, the emancipated one, whose behavior is free from any sensual desire. Sutta Nipāta 4.8 Pasūra Sutta. Discourse to Pasūra, the debater. Purity is to be found only here, they claim, while denying the possibility for it to be present in ways of thought other than their own. Being stuck in their views and without budging from what they think to be truth, each rigidly holds the firm position how wisdom cannot exist anywhere else except in their own tradition. Desiring to engage in debates, they keep throwing themselves into the crowd, so to prove others to be no more than fools. With their conniving ways, they cause much contention through their disputing, as a way to be seen as experts, in order to satisfy their constant thirst for praise. Joining different assemblies, they seek out opportunities for debate, craving the excitement of winning in disputes, but while also fearing the possibility of losing and therefore being blamed. And when their arguments are indeed refuted, they first get embarrassed, with their heads drooping, but are quick to turn on the other and attack with anger, with agitated and confused minds. When cross-questioned in a debate about their teachings, and when faults are found proving their shortcomings, coming out as the losers, they become depressed, while lamenting and sighing the words, "I have been beaten, now I am lost." Seeing how with other sects people flock to attend debates that take place, you can witness the excitement in those claiming victory, for having won the debate, along with the sense of dejection and defeat seen in those who have lost. Therefore, realizing that no good can come out of such praise, do not engage in disputes and give up debating altogether, as it will only serve your ignorance. For when praised by the crowd for winning in such debates, the sense of gratification overwhelms the person. Meanwhile, ignorance flares up, clouding the heart, as they start laughing in the middle of the crowd for having achieved success in their aim to defeat the other. It is for this reason that overconfidence itself, which now floods his mind, becomes the very cause for his downfall and destruction, as he behaves conceitedly with a heart full of blind arrogance. On witnessing this clearly, the wise declare that no purity can be gained from such endeavors, and therefore teach how you should avoid disputes altogether. Much like the warrior who, after having satiated himself at the king's feast with rich food, comes out energized and roaring in search of an opponent to defeat, so too, Sura, I see you have returned here, again looking for a challenger to fight against, when still there is none to be found. If you encounter someone who is fixated on a view, where they fervently try dragging you into a debate to prove the supposed supremacy of their view, saying this only is the truth, then just tell them you are not there to dispute, and don't be pulled into a debate, for debates give rise to enemies. However, for those of us who have walked away from the crowd, living secluded, there is neither contention nor views or doctrines being pitted against each other. So, do you see, Pasūra, who it is you have come to battle with? For even the best among the wise has nothing left for him to uphold, and nothing grasped that needs defending. Yet you are here, having carried with you all kinds of speculative ideas and views in your head to start a debate. But instead, you have come only to encounter an assembly of purified ones, those who are no longer entangled in a net of views. For the wise see the futility of what you seek, hence there is no way for you to proceed. Sutta Nipāta 4.9 Māgaṇḍiya Sutta Discourse to Māgaṇḍiya. Even while meeting the daughters of Mara, craving, affection, and lust, no sexual desire arose in me, and now you offer me this bag of excrement and urine, which I would not even touch with the tip of my toe. If you refuse to accept such a jewel of a woman with beauty unmatched, someone who is desired by both kings and men alike, well, do tell us then, what doctrine is it that you teach? What are the training rules for the lifestyle that you consider to be virtuous, which would lead to a new becoming? The Blessed One then replied, Māgaṇḍiya, searching as I have to find the discriminating Dhamma yet not becoming identified with all that I have penetratingly seen and gained insights into. On account of all that, I became established in contentedness and true security, as the peace and appeasement permeate within me." Then the Brahmin Māgaṇḍiya said, "All those discoveries you have made while on your quest, where you still remain unattached to whatever you have penetratingly seen and gained insights into, nor identifying with them, how, O sage, do you declare the peace and appeasement permeating within, where you have become established in contentedness and true security?" The Blessed One then replied, "One becomes pure not through having or maintaining this or that view, Māgaṇḍiya, nor by relying on what others have taught you or the knowledge you have collected, nor by observing training rules or other ritualistic practices you engage in. But you must also understand that it is not by the complete avoidance of these either. In other words, it is not by not having this or that view, nor by not relying on what you have learned from others, or the knowledge gained, nor by relinquishing the training rules and precepts either, whereby purity may develop in you. Instead, it is through not latching onto these, nor getting identified with them, nor taking them too seriously, that one becomes established in peace and contentedness, truly and completely free, without relying on anything or anyone other than oneself, with no need to be longing for a future life either." Continuing with another question, Māgaṇḍiya the Brahmin asked, "If, as you declare, purity is not to be attained through having or maintaining this or that view, nor by relying on what others have taught or the knowledge one has collected, nor by observing training rules or other ritualistic practices one engages in, nor it being attained without these, then, as I understand it, the Dhamma you teach is that of a foolish and bewildered mind. For one must have at least some view established in him to fall back on and resort to in order to attain purity." Then the Blessed One replied by saying to Māgaṇḍiya, "The fact that you are still questioning us on this matter clearly shows your reliance on the beliefs and views you have adopted and are holding on to. It is because of your adherence to these that you have doubts and uncertainty, Māgaṇḍiya, which is obstructing your understanding here. Hence, you are unable to even get the slightest idea or gain the smallest insight, which is why you call this Dhamma foolish and bewildering. Anyone who thinks of himself as equal, superior, or inferior to another will, sooner or later, get into disputes. But the one who remains unperturbed, not allowing himself to be pulled this way and that by these three ways of comparing, no thoughts of equality or superiority will remain. For why would such a noble one go on claiming, 'Yes, this is true,' or why would he engage in disputing and arguing with others by stating, 'No, this is false'? So, if there is no longer a question of being equal or superior, then what is there left for disputing? Once having left the home life, the sage, now wandering homeless, does not go seeking new companions or relationships to become close friends with anyone in the village. With sensuality all given up, he remains neither concerned about getting recognition nor praise or honor. And with nothing left to be agitated about, there would be no arguments with people for him to get into. A Naga, Arahant, is no longer contentious, for he would not get involved in debates about anything in the world entirely. seeing that he has left it all behind and secluded himself from it, like the stem of a lotus, born in the mud and piercing out of the water, yet unsullied by neither. Likewise, the peaceful sage, desireless and settled, remains unsullied by the world and all the sensuality it offers. Having seen the Dhamma and attained to right view, the wise one does not become conceited, nor engages in comparing while placing himself above, below, or as equal to others. He no longer needs to do things or to study further, so to impress others or to show off, since he sees things clearly and cannot be deluded nor led by any rigid dogmas or lifeless views. Māgaṇḍiya, there can be no bonds that could ever tie up the person who has finally detached himself from reliance on perceptions and views. No delusion could ever exist for the one who has finally released himself through wisdom. But those who keep compiling and adopting more views while relying on perceptions continue to loiter and float around in the world of samsara. Sutta Nipāta 4.10 Purābheda Sutta. Before the dissolution of the body. What does one have to first see and understand? What are the rules you recommend one must train in to become virtuous, so that one attains to tranquility, experiencing genuine contentedness? This I ask Gautama. Kindly speak to me about the greatest among men. And the Blessed One replied, Before the dissolution of the body, see to it that craving has been eradicated from your heart. Thus, by living without depending on or identifying with the past, by not losing yourself in constant preparations or calculations as you waste away the present, you will free yourself from both likes and dislikes. Without anger, without any fear or trembling, not boasting, without remorse or hesitation, remaining scrupulous in pure conduct, while speaking but a little and not with arrogance. Truly, that would be describing the sage who is verbally restrained. Also, do not be nostalgic or grieve over the past, as you drop all your attachments with the future too. For the one established in the benefits of seclusion examines all manner of contacts discriminately, as he is no more led by any views or opinions. Stay withdrawn, while living free from deceit or hypocrisy, neither stingy nor coveting anything, and without any malintent or jealousy in your heart. Do not be insolent or rude. Instead, stay caring and considerate, not contemptible, nor slandering anyone. Without lusting after this or that pleasure, do not be conceited, but remain gentle and considerate, as you teach with kind articulation, neither becoming excitedly heated, nor cold and lifeless, but still, respectfully approachable. Do not train yourself with the intention to gain some external benefit, like status, wealth, or prestige, nor become upset or angry when you do not receive these gains. Do not make enemies for yourself on account of craving or because of your fondness for various tastes. Stay equanimous and always mindful. Never compare or contrast yourself with anyone out there in the world as being equal, inferior, or superior to. Thus, the wise live without pride. Have for yourself no other dependencies except for the Dhamma, and understanding the Dhamma, remain independent, with no craving left in your heart to either be reborn or to end it all. For I call the one who has freed himself from all sensual pleasures someone who is truly at peace, because there are no more shackles or bonds left for him to be tied with, and for that reason he is the one who has crossed beyond the craving for the world. He has no sons and no cattle. He possesses no property, no fields, nor any wealth. No more could there be found in him any desire to own or possess anything, nor to sell anything. Whatever terms people might use to describe a putujjana, an ordinary, common, and uncivilized person, or a recluse, or a Brahmin, all those have no relevance to him. For that reason he is left untouched, and with no agitation in his heart by the accusations he hears. With no more greed left in his heart, and no contention too, the sage does not speak about himself as superior, equal, or inferior to his peers, and by no longer possessing the seeds that would bring him back again, there is no return for him back to any world. Having nothing left for him in the entire world to call his own, he does not mourn after that which he could no longer enjoy as before, nor does he try to bury himself within the teachings or treat the Dhamma as something to be possessed. Thus, he is indeed the one, I declare, who is truly contented and at peace. Sutta Nipāta 4.11 Kalahavivāda Sutta on Fighting and Conflicts. How do fighting, conflicts, arguments, grief and many tears, avarice, arrogance, conceit and slandering all begin? Please tell me, how do these things find their start? Holding things close to your heart is what leads to fighting, conflicts, arguments, grief and many tears, avarice, arrogance, conceit, along with slandering, as they find their beginning when things become dear to you. Fighting and conflicts are soon joined by avarice, all of which pave the way for slander to take place. Where do they originate? The things people grab and hold on to while calling them dear, or those things one greedily yearns for in the world? How about the hoping and longing for the other, for which people cast their hooks to re-become in future births? Where do these find their start? It is because of desiring that people grab and hold on to things, calling them dear. And it is desire, too, where greedily yearning for things in the world finds its origin. As for hoping and longing for the other, for which people cast their hooks to re-become into future births, that also finds its start within desire itself. And how does desire itself arise in the world? And from where do discriminations originate, along with anger, lies, doubts, and all the other things that are taught by the shaven-head recluse? It is in liking the pleasurable and disliking the painful, where desire finds its origin, whence it arises. By having seen and witnessed the presence and absence of things relatable, people go on discriminating, I like this and I don't like that. Anger, lies, and doubts, along with all the deceptive mental states, are the results of the same old pair, liking and disliking. Therefore, the one still suffering from confusion must train himself in the path of knowledge, for it is only through the means of knowledge and personal understanding that the great recluse speaks on these matters. And how do those two, liking and disliking, find their start? And through the disappearance and vanishing of what do they also cease and are no more? Please, kindly tell me also how and where this process of arising and vanishing originates. It is in contact itself, the place where both liking and disliking originate and arise. For when contact disappears and vanishes, then they too cease and are no more. As for arising and vanishing, well, these also find their origin within the same, arising because of contact itself. And from where does contact arise in the world? And what is the reason for there to be such grabbing and holding on to things? What is it that once vanished leads to the disappearance of the wanting to grab and hold on to things in the first place? And through the disappearance of what comes the end to the very possibility for contacts to even be able to make contact in the first place? Contact arises in the presence of name and form. When there is longing, then there is grabbing and holding on to things. Once longing vanishes, then the wanting to grab and hold on to things also disappears. And it is through the disappearance of all forms whereby contacts become no longer able to even make contact in the first place. And through what means could one experience the disappearance of all forms? In what way could happiness and suffering both cease and just vanish? Please tell me, what could make these two disappear? For these are very important things for us to know. It is neither through blind obedience to perception or one's mental associations, nor by relying on wrong perception, neither through the absence of perceptions or understanding, nor by pondering on what was perceived in the past. It is in this manner that one experiences the disappearance of all forms, because the origin lies in perception itself that keeps working behind the scenes, always constructing, the real architect of all mental proliferations in the world. Whatever we have asked, you have answered them all. But we have one more question to ask. Please, do explain to us this. Is it true what some wise men say, that the highest potential for the purity of yakhas extends only this much, or could there be something else for us to know on this? It is true that some wise men do say that the highest potential for the purity of yakhas extends only this much. It must be said, however, that there are others who teach that in time, with skillful application, one can even go beyond this and experience full liberation without any residues remaining. But, understanding the role of conditionality in all these things, while investigating the underlying fact of dependency of all things, and by realizing this directly, the truly wise one is liberated, without ever getting involved in debates with anyone, cutting himself free from further rebirths. Sutta Nipāta 4.12 Cūḻabyūha Sutta, shorter discourse on getting ready for battle. There are those who hold on to their individual opinions and views, the so-called experts who continue disputing contentiously, as they exclaim, "Whoever sees and understands the Dhamma as we do, then they must truly know the Dhamma. But whoever does not agree with us, then they don't know what they are talking about." In this manner, they go on disputing, arguing, battling, while calling the other a mere fool and without any experience. And in such hubbub, how can one find out as to who is indeed speaking the truth? For each calls himself an expert. If the mere fact that someone does not agree with another's view makes them a fool, or intellectually inferior, or lacking any wisdom, then all of them are indeed fools, collectively, for they each are stuck in their own views, unable to see beyond them. But with the wise, who have purified themselves through right view, dwelling with wisdom in the heart that is pure, considerate, and wholesome in behavior, none could be found among them to be inferior in any way, for they are freed from the pangs of ignorance, now gone beyond all manner of disputing, having seen through and recognized the true nature of things. I do not consider it accurate when people call each other fools, because each of them has convinced themselves that the view they hold must be true and unmistakable, hence their insistence that the other is no more than a fool. While some declare their teaching to be correct and true, they turn and call the teachings of others to be no more than empty and not true. They go on disputing and fighting with each other. But why can't recluses all come to an agreement about what is the truth? For there is only one truth and not another, understanding which no sane or intelligent person would continue arguing. Yet, recluses keep weaving for themselves new truths, and as a result, not a single one of them agrees on the same thing. Why do those claiming themselves to be experts go on proclaiming different truths? Do they really believe there are multiple truths, or are those simply fabricated by their own reasoning? No, there are no multiple truths to speak of. There are only mistaken conclusions, the results of wrong reasoning that stem from the conviction that there is permanence. Relying on their views, they speak of this being true and the other a lie. Other than this, there are no truths to speak of. Whether debating over what is seen, heard, experienced, or the training rules or precepts, they keep judging and scoffing at others, while labeling them fools and mere amateurs. Meanwhile, whatever reasons they are using for labeling the other a fool or an amateur, for the same exact reasons they are calling themselves experts. Therefore, despite the fact that he uses the same reasoning, he continues to despise the other, even though he hypocritically distinguishes himself as an expert. Intoxicated by conceit, and never lacking in matchless words about himself, he crowns himself as perfect and exceptional, at least in his mind, a conviction he continues holding on to and grabs, which he also uses to look down upon everyone else. Meanwhile, those opposing his position and views, who in turn regard him as inferior, will automatically be regarded by him as lacking in wisdom, compared to him, of course. But if others look upon him with respect and consider him as truly exceptional, surely then it would be difficult for anyone to call the other a fool or inferior. Those who are unable to see the truth in this cannot be called pure, for they will continue missing the opportunity to go beyond their sectarian thinking, thus blinded from seeing the Dhamma as a result of latching on greedily to their views and opinions. Skeptics, entangled in their own views, passionately exclaim how purity can only be found within their own teachings, whereas no purity could ever be found or taught in the teachings of others. Thus, they lock themselves in the world of stagnant views and blind beliefs, journeying aimlessly on never-ending paths where no growth in wisdom or any spiritual development could ever take place. If one's own views on the spiritual path are thus greedily and passionately adhered to, then why should anyone be calling another a fool? For he himself, through his rigidity and close-mindedness, would not be behaving any better than those whom he criticizes, hence proving himself to be none other than yet another fool. Standing to distinguish himself from others, proud and conceited with judgment for others, comparing himself to them, he soon finds himself caught in dispute after dispute. But the one who has given up judging has already put an end to all battling and quarreling. Sutta Nipāta 4.13 Mahābyūha Sutta, Greater Discourse on Getting Ready for Battle. There are those who, while stuck in their own views and narratives, continue arguing by stating, "This alone and nothing else is true." Would such people be inviting to themselves criticism and blame from the wise? Or would they be gaining praise for this staunchly held position of theirs? I declare that these two, blame and praise, are in themselves insufficient as outcome measures, especially for the one seeking peace, detached from engaging in any kind of debates. Therefore, one should avoid getting into any disputes altogether, because peace and tranquility can never be found where debating and arguing exist. So, despite what is commonly accepted or even encouraged by ignorant folk, the wise simply stay away from becoming involved in such matters. For how could the one who avoids having likes and dislikes of things seen and heard end up getting involved in such foolish affairs in the first place? Those holding on strictly to virtue declare purity comes only as the result of having restraint throughout life. In having undertaken their vows, they train in them with complete dedication and undeterred focus. However, by looking at purity to be solely the result of ethical living, they claim themselves to be supreme experts. Yet, as a result, they continue being stuck in samsara, moving from one birth to the next, loitering around. And when such a person fails in maintaining his ethical vows and virtue, he becomes distraught and starts trembling, for he has failed in his task, and therefore feels he has lost his purity. He feels estranged and abandoned from a happy life, longing to recapture his sense of purity, being adrift, just like a traveler on a journey who has lost his way, left alone in the desert, wanting to get back home. But the moment you give up your avid reliance on mere virtue as your only source of true purity, you also give up all those shackles of pure and impure deeds, the results of blindly following mere rites and rituals, together with actions that may be seen as blameworthy or blameless by the wise. Suddenly, there is no more longing for purity over impurity, and with no more anxiety or confusion left in the heart, while living in solitude, one becomes quiet, finding true peace and tranquility. Meanwhile, many in their revulsion to having the stains of Kāma try to get rid of them by relying on their ascetic practices of self-mortification, validating and feeding their wrong views further by what is seen, heard, or deduced. As a result, they mistakenly claim that purity happens as the natural outcome of continual existences in samsara. But while leaving their craving untouched and as strong as ever, they keep drifting in rebirths from one life to the next. Yet, there are those who yearn for more, experiencing anxiety as they tremble, lost in prayer when it is their time to die, unsure of what's coming next, seeing that they still have plans that are now left incomplete. But for those with no more passing away, nor any realms to reappear into, what need is there to tremble or be anxious about? Whom would they need to pray to, and for what? What one calls to be the ultimate or highest, others call the lowest and most inferior. So how could one tell as to which one among them could be saying the truth, seeing that each claims to be an expert in their own right, claiming their teaching to be the most perfect, while calling those of others flawed and inferior? They continue arguing and debating, each holding their own conclusions and no one else's to be the absolute truth. Of those stating that the teaching of another is inferior, lower, or lacking in substance, whilst their own teaching happens to be the best, having substance and depth, it is safe to say that none would, in fact, be speaking the truth, merely coming from an entirely biased point of view and in a stubborn way. But so long as people are only interested in applying the standards found and used in their own teaching, without considering the possible benefits to be found in the teachings of others, then no one will see beyond their own path, and thereby truth or purity as such would remain to be a personal matter, being exclusive and unique to each. The noble Brahmin, however, after wisely investigating and testing, no longer attaches himself to teachings which require the authentication of someone else in order to be valid. Instead, by relying on his own direct experience and understanding of the Dhamma as the ultimate confirmation, he leaves all types of arguments and debating behind him in the dust. While others claim that their confidence comes from what they know or what they see and what they are taught as to how things are supposed to be, in truth, for them, purity remains as the mere product of belief, an opinion, a point of view, and not much else. But when one has truly seen and therefore directly understands, then why would there even be a need for having views or opinions about things? Nevertheless, the ignorant ones staunchly insist that purity must be passed on from another in order for it to be true. When seeing, what in fact is being seen is none other than Nāma-rūpa. So, when experiencing this thing called seeing, all that is being witnessed is name and form. That is what in fact those people are seeing, declare the wise ones, who understand how true purity can never be experienced by way of Nāma-rūpa. It is nearly impossible to teach someone who is attached to their solidified worldview, as they insist on seeing reality only through their own preconceived notions about it. This because he continues talking in reference to purity or happiness being there on one end, but while using references and conclusions he has heard about from others of it being over there on the opposite end of the spectrum. However, the noble Brahmin, having attained to right view, does not get stuck in such conclusions, for he is no more a victim of views. Instead, having already understood the pitfalls of preconceived notions and conclusions made about things, he stands aloof and never gets his hands dirty with such matters. Thus, he remains serenely peaceful, while ignorant fools lose their composure. In this way, By having released himself from the knots, the sage stays away with no bonds left for him to become tied to, whilst various camps of disputes continue forming around him. Thus, he remains content among the discontented, dwelling in equanimity and pleasantly calm, while others live and breathe restlessly. In giving up the contaminants of the heart carried over from the past, and not making any new ones either, the wise one finds himself no longer at the mercy of his old tendencies, nor becoming a mouthpiece for conclusions or beliefs. Instead, being freed from the net of views, he neither gets attached to the world nor falls into the trap of self-loathing. Thus, staying uninvolved with all mental phenomena that may arise, be they the results of what is seen, heard, or thought, such a sage who has put down his burden is truly released, and therefore has no further need to imagine anything, or force anything, or even yearn for anything. This is what the Blessed One said. Sutta Nipāta 4.14 Tuvaṭaka Sutta Discourse on Not Wasting Time. I have come to ask you, O great sage, kinsman of the sun, about seclusion and the attainment of cessation. How does a bhikkhu, having understood, become released and cooled, no longer reaching out into the world to grab onto anything? And the Blessed One replied by saying, with wisdom, he abandons the identification within himself of an I am, as he cuts out the very root of conceptualizing and mental proliferations, so dominant in the mind. He does this by constantly training himself while uprooting all manner of craving from his heart. Whatever truths he may come to know, whether of an internal or external nature, he would not let them dominate his heart, nor would he become conceited because of them. After all, the wise ones know for sure that settling on anything means Nibbana is still far away. Because of this, he would not think of himself as being superior, inferior, or even equal. Thus, in making contact with all kinds of experiences, he does not fall into the trap of incessantly comparing and contrasting. Always situating himself in internal appeasement by finding peace within, such a bhikkhu does not reach outside of himself, looking for tranquility or peace to come to him from others or outside. As such, if he never takes up anything, what would he need to put back down? Just like in the middle of the deep ocean, there are no waves to be seen crashing about, where stillness and quiet pervade. Likewise, the bhikkhu, standing quiet and unmoved, does not make any fulsome ripples due to the absence of arrogance or pride in his heart. The one with eyes wide open, himself having witnessed it directly, has explained the Dhamma that drives out all troubles with certainty. Now, please speak to us about the training in this practice. O Blessed One, speak about the rules of higher training, along with the ways on going deeper in meditative practice. Do not go coveting with lustful eyes. Protect the ears from disparaging and common talk. Do not greedily seek out flavors and reject the possession of anything whatsoever in the world. When the bhikkhu is touched by a painful experience, he does not lose his composure, nor wails for any reason. This because he is no longer a person who looks for re-becoming somewhere else, to run away from the terrors being faced now. In receiving your alms food and drinks, other nourishments and clothes, do not go on accumulating or storing them, nor worry or fret about whether you will obtain such things ever again. The bhikkhu is not a drifter. He is a meditator. So, do not be fond of traveling here and there, wanting to explore different places, for such things will only make you more restless and negligent. Instead, find yourself a quiet place and just stay there, practicing diligently. Such a bhikkhu would not pay attention to whether he is getting enough sleep or not. Instead, his drive is focused as he puts continuous energy into staying awake to maintain his practice. And by giving up drowsiness, he gets rid of all manner of self-deceptions, merriments, distractibility, looking physically good, or thinking about anything to do with sex. No true disciple of mine would practice casting spells or making Attadaṇḍa charms, or engage in any kind of dream interpretation, reading signs, or astrology. As such, the true bhikkhu would not dedicate his time interpreting the cries of animals, nor engage in animal husbandry, nor the art of healing physical ailments, nor inducing human fertilization or abortions. Such a bhikkhu is never excited nor elated in hearing praise. Similarly, he is not startled, shaken, or depressed in hearing others target him with their blame and criticism. Instead, he is one who shuns longing altogether, along with stinginess, jealousy, vindictiveness, and slander. The bhikkhu does not involve himself with the buying or selling of things, which in itself reduces the chances for him to receive blame from others. He does not enjoy lingering in the village, within society, or among lay people, nor does he work up his charm for supporters to like him, so he may secure more gain for himself. The bhikkhu does not show off or become boastful, nor does he use innuendos or ambiguities, speaking words with ulterior motives. When training, he is neither disrespectful nor contentious. He does not live his life through lies, nor is he intentionally cunning or devious, working with hidden motives. He neither despises others nor looks down upon them because of who he is or where he comes from, as opposed to others. He does not discriminate against nor degrades others because of his level of wisdom, attainments, or even the training rules he maintains. And even when he is provoked by hearing or witnessing negative remarks and attacks made against him from others, whether from monastics or even lay people, he would not go on attacking them in response. This because the virtuous ones do not retaliate. Thus, by understanding the Dhamma, the bhikkhu constantly trains himself mindfully with scrutiny, always reminding himself that Nibbana is ultimately the ever-present state of peace and contentment. Because of this, he is never negligent of Gautama's dispensation. In this manner, the bhikkhu continues training diligently on the path, in the example of the Tathagata, as per his dispensation, whereby through his own efforts he attains that which had not been attained by him previously. Thus, he becomes an undefeated conqueror, a true vanquisher himself, who has seen the Dhamma first-hand, directly, and not as the result of hearsay. This is what the Blessed One said. Sutta Nipāta 4.15 Attadaṇḍa Sutta, with weapons in hand. So long as there are weapons in hand, fear and terror will continue to rise in people's hearts. Take a look and see the quarrels they keep getting themselves into. I will now share with you the urgency this reality triggered in me. Seeing the frightened people so hostile and fighting with each other, I was overcome by fear, witnessing how they were struggling, thrashing about, just like fish caught in very shallow water. The entire world is completely without an essence, with all its parts constantly moving and unstable. And as I ran in all directions in my quest, trying to look for a steady and stable place, I found it impossible to find a shelter or to settle anywhere. But even when arguments would sometimes come to conclusion and people's hostility towards one another would subside, I became disillusioned, as I noticed I had been struck by an arrow so difficult to remove or get rid of, for it was deeply lodged in my heart. Being shot by that arrow, one will keep running in all directions. But once it is pulled out of the heart, suddenly the running comes to an end, as does the quest to look for a shelter for oneself. Here follows the recitation of the principles in training. Whatever shackles you may encounter in the world, do not get caught in them or become fixated on them. Instead, by understanding and seeing through the tricks of sensual pleasures completely, just give them up and train yourself for the attainment of cessation. Be honest and not careless or impetuous, neither cunning nor slandering, while you overcome anger. For the sage transcends the evils of both greed and the unquenching appetite to possess or own things. Do not let drowsiness dominate you, but instead prevail over sleepiness and procrastination, and no longer live a life of negligence. Remind yourself that the person who has set his mind on experiencing Nibbana has no room in his heart for arrogance. Do not tell lies or say things you know are untrue. Stop being preoccupied with the body or worrying so much about keeping it healthy. Know accurately what the conceit in the heart is and just give it up entirely, while walking away from reckless actions and any further impulsive conduct. Do not delight in the nostalgia of what's gone past. Do not become infatuated in welcoming new experiences either. When parts of your life become less and less, do not grieve. And do not lean into new things either, for the fascination they promise due to unfamiliarity. Greed, I say, is the great flood, whereas yearning, I say, is the turbulent current it produces. The objects of desire are the very drive and momentum of this current. As for sensuality, well, that is the sticky mud one gets submerged and stuck in, so difficult to shake off, so transcend the flood. The sage never deviates from what is true. Being a true Brahmin, he stands high and dry on the farther shore, having given up everything. For this reason, indeed, he is the one declared to be finally at peace. Having personally known, he is the one possessing true knowledge. And with this knowledge of the Dhamma, he goes about into the world with behavior that is untouched and spotless. This because the one who has already transcended sense craving jumps cleanly over the traps and ambushes of the world so hard to get past. Not grieving nor hoping for anything, he cuts across the stream, and by loosening the bonds, he sets himself free. Let whatever happened in the past just wither away, and once it falls off, make sure you have nothing of it left behind. And while you stand here in the middle of the present, so long as you don't grab on to anything of the past or future, you will finally experience peace that's incomparable. Being empty of the drive to possess or own anything in the realm of name and form, he does not become overwhelmed when things he cherishes are no more. On account of that, there can be no loss for him to be depressed about, with no suffering left for him to face. When there is no more predisposition within oneself to think or name something as mine or yours, then, in the absence of any leaning towards selfish attachment, one does not grieve any more, nor cries out and exclaims, I have nothing. Leave your heart empty of cruelty and greed, lacking in passions and lust, as you stand unmoved with an impartial attitude towards everything you experience in all circumstances. This is my declaration whenever asked about the good qualities of the sage who remains unshakable. And such an unshakable person stands with no desire left in his heart to perform actions any more, no need to accumulate deeds, thinking of the wholesome versus the unwholesome. Being dispassionate throughout in all kinds of circumstances, and with aroused effort he is appeased, seeing security everywhere he looks. The sage does not speak words of being equal, inferior, or superior to anyone, for he is cooled and calmed. With vindictiveness and hatred removed from his heart, he no longer picks up anything. Hence, there is no need for him to put anything down. Sutta Nipāta 4.16 Sāriputta Sutta. Sāriputta. Never before have I seen or heard from anyone of a teacher such as you, one who, having come from Tusita, the heavenly realm of the happy devas, would speak such delightfully sweet words to us, and in such a beautiful manner, exclaimed the Venerable Sāriputta. Throughout the cosmos, with its countless devas, the one with the wisdom eye shines forth more brightly than the highest of gods, dispelling the blackest of darkness, the one who attained to the highest all on his own. O Lord, independent and singularly free, genuine pillar of truth, the awakened one himself, I have come here on behalf of those of us who are still bound up, not yet freed, bearing with me a question to ask here in your presence. When a bhikkhu, having become disgusted by companionships, resorts to solitary places, such as sitting at the roots of trees, in a charnel ground, in a mountain cave, or a ravine, or sleeping on various types of terrains, be they high or low, how many are the fear-causing dangers he may encounter, as he resides alone in such desolate and solitary places, terrors which he is supposed to be unstirred by, while living in those quiet abodes. How many are the risks and challenges for him to consider and overcome, when going off to practice in an uninhabited and remote part of the jungle, or anywhere in the world, where the bhikkhu may go to live, as he seeks out the deathless. How should be his demeanor while speaking? What manner of activities would be allowed for him to engage in? What sort of places should he be going off to and staying in? What virtuous behavior or conduct should be expected of such a bhikkhu who is resolute in his goal? What is the specific training for him to undergo, whereby in dedicating himself to it, the bhikkhu can become integrated, collected, sharply alert, and mindful, so that he can recognize and thus remove his heart's defilements, just like the goldsmith pulling out the impurities from the gold he melts? And the Blessed One replied by saying, as it relates to this Dhamma, Sāriputta, when a bhikkhu becomes disgusted by companionships and resorts to solitary places to seek out the deathless, desiring awakening, I will explain to you what I know from personal experience as I answer your questions, Sāriputta. There are 5 dangers that the wise and resolutely mindful bhikkhu should not fear. These are gadflies, mosquitoes, snakes, and other creeping things, human contacts, and 4-legged animals. Similarly, the mindful bhikkhu should not be afraid of those practitioners belonging to other religious sects, even if one witnesses them threatening him personally or imposing danger on his life. Additionally, he should fearlessly withstand any and all kinds of challenges and risks he may encounter on his path, while always seeking the wholesome outcome. And when struck by various illnesses and pains of hunger, as well as exposure to extreme cold and heat, he must endure them all, even if one continues to be touched by all these and other afflictions. The bhikkhu, having decided to walk away from the safety of his home life, should energetically persevere in his resolve and continue striving to overcome them all. He must not steal, nor speak what is untrue. And when he makes contact with various beings, whether mighty or small, strong or weak, his touch must be saturated with loving kindness. And when his heart becomes muddled, or if he detects any agitation in the mind, he must quickly dispel them, for these are none other than the allies of Mara, the evil one. Not falling under the power of anger or conceit, instead, he stands firmly as he confidently goes after these two by digging them out from their very roots. Furthermore, by avoiding to get ambushed in the net of likes and dislikes, he sets himself free from both the pleasurable and the painful. In his efforts, he venerates wisdom above all else, wrapped in joy as he experiences the goodness that living this holy life keeps generating in him. In that manner, he expels from his heart whatever agitation or uncertainty those troubles have been causing him. And by overpowering the gloomy dissatisfaction that results from living all alone in a remote jungle, he also overpowers the 4 types of sorrowful fixations. Would I find some food for me to eat today? Where must I go to find something to eat? I cannot get any sleep. Oh, will I even find a good place to sleep tonight? The noble disciple in training, wandering alone and without a home, must carefully reflect on these 4 sorrowful fixations and fully eradicate them all. Obtaining food and robes at the appropriate time, he knows the meaning of moderation, so to become contented with the purpose of what is being received. By practicing restraint in regards to all things, he must guard his senses as he walks through the village, not speaking back harshly, even if he were provoked. With his eyes lowered down, not fond of traveling here and there, dedicated to meditation, he remains well awake everywhere he goes, dwelling in equanimity and serenely present. He applies himself with effort, as he carefully eliminates one by one the causes for remorse and worry from his heart. And if he is scolded or reproved, then he mindfully must continue staying soft in his heart towards his companions in the holy life. The speech he uses must remain skillful and appropriate to the occasion, for he must always be aware not to utter a word or gossip which might bring him blame from the wise. Furthermore, there are 5 kinds of contaminations found in the world, for which the mindful practitioner must constantly train and dedicate himself to fully remove and cleanse out from his heart. He must endure and overpower the lust he has for visible forms, sounds he hears, flavors he touches, smells and physical touches he experiences. Therefore, the bhikkhu who removes the longing and desire he has for these things through maintaining his mindfulness constantly liberates his heart from all contaminants. He experiences freedom as he spends his time ceaselessly engaged in examining this Dhamma that is beautiful. In doing so, while being collected within himself, he banishes all darkness once and for all. This is what the Blessed One said.